Listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Julie Salazar-Layton with PyTech and Money Guide Pro. I'm very excited today to introduce to you our guest speaker. Our special guest speaker today is Deena Katz. Deena Katz is the recipient, the 2016 recipient of the Alexandra Armstrong Lifetime Achievement Award, and she is the co-chairman of Avensky Katz and Folds. She's also a very sought-after speaker and an author and an associate professor at Texas Tech University. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Deena Katz. And just so you know, I will be monitoring the Q&A. So we will have an opportunity for questions at the end, and I will be then at that point just raising those questions to Deena, and she can respond to those. You're all in listen-only mode, but please feel free to enter your questions in the chat section or the question section. Thank you. Deena?
Thank you very much, Julie. And you can give me the keyboard and mouse now because I seem to have gotten a view of your screen. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Today we're going to talk about some ideas to help women secure their financial future. I think what's important is not the technical things that we talk to women about, but how we talk to women about the things that they need to do and what's happening. So I'm going to focus a lot on communication, on do's and don'ts. Please don't think that I am male bashing if I draw some ideas between women and men. It just is the way it is, and I am not picking on you guys. Let's see if I can move this. Okay, can you move the screen for me? And I don't see that it's moving, so there we go. Okay, so here's the picture for women today. The average age of widowhood is 59. Now remember, that's an average. So I'm sure you're all saying, wow, that's really young. It is when you consider it's the average. 66% of all marriages end in divorce, including remarriages. 4 in every 10 American families, the woman is the breadwinner. And here's a kicker. Women control $11 trillion of the nation's investable assets, but they represent only 51%, and it's expected to be 66% by 2020. Can you move? Women represent 48% of the country's millionaires. Would you move back one, please? Oh, here we go. Maybe I'm doing it. Here we go. They get 81% of the compensation that men receive. So they're lower paid. They're still nearly half of the country of the millionaires in this country are women. They live approximately 5 years longer. They're still a part of this sandwich generation in that they still spend 17 years taking care of their children and 18 years taking care of their parents. Their parents are living longer. They're assuming some responsibility for that. So they're still in that mode of financial responsibility. Okay, can we move forward? All right. So the bottom line, 95% of the women, if they are not today, during their lifetime, will be the family's primary decision maker. That means that the clients you have today who are not presently taking care of themselves and their family will at some time be doing so. 70% of widows leave their advisor within the first 12 months. This is something I want to come back to because understanding why they do that is one of the important things about working with women. 66% of women have an advisor. They say they're unhappy. The women, 66 who say they have an advisor, they're unhappy. They're not getting what they're expecting. 95% say they're well served. Everything is fine with them. So we're concluding that there is this gender service gap in the financial services industry. Women are not receiving what they're expecting, men seem to be very happy with what they're getting. Next slide. Women are more likely to make decisions using facts, values, and relationships. Now, this is important to know because they will look to the relationships and the values in making a decision on working with you or on making a decision on their own personal life. The first thing is they will want space to decide. They want to know they have time. They do not want to be put under a today-only decision. They need to be able to have that space. They will focus on the relationship. So if your relationship with your women client is strong, it will be much easier for her to work with you in the decisions that have to be made. As an advisor, showing community involvement. Women will always look to see where are you volunteering, where are you doing things in the community to help build the community. Many women are community-minded, and they want to know that their advisors are also community-minded, which brings the charitable intent. Some of the studies that we looked at Texas Tech University regarding charitable interest, many advisors don't ask. They just simply assume if you have a charitable interest, you'll tell me. Women want to be asked, what kind of charitable interest do you have? And do you have any controlling interest in endowments or in any kind of situation where you would want to have further discussion about this? They want your need to know to be authentic with them. They want to discuss their charitable intent. The last two things, engendering trust and demonstrate empathy. These are important features in working with female clients because they put so much on the trust. There's a book out called The Speed of Trust. It's written by Stephen Covey, who is the son of Stephen R. Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You might want to get a copy of it. It's in there. Covey says that trust happens a lot faster than you think. You think that you need to build this trust over time, but really people can build solid trust by demonstrating certain things. And the first thing is demonstrating respect, having respect for the people that you're working with. Creating transparency. This is how we do things. This is why we do things this way. Making sure they understand everything about you and your the way you and your firm work. Be reliable. When you say you'll do something, you do it. Be sensitive. If someone tells you something very sensitive, you instead of saying, "Oh, great, let's move on," you might say something to that effect. Or, "I don't know how you feel. I can't even imagine how you feel about that, but I'm glad you told me." In ways that show that you are sensitive to them. Be thoughtful. Women clients like to receive thank you notes. They like to have you tell them, "I appreciate you being my client." One of the things about demonstrating empathy, actually there are 3 sort of interrelated things here: sympathy, pity, and empathy. Sympathy is, I feel sorry about that, whatever it is, I feel sorry. What really gets me is when someone has lost a spouse, saying, "I'm sorry for your loss." That is so impersonal. Of course you're sorry. Everyone's sorry. Pity is condescending sorry. Well, I'm just really sorry that you feel that way. Empathy is feeling what you feel or feeling what your client feels along with them. So delving into something that you can relate to, that shows them, "Gee, I am sitting here with you in your corner, and I recognize this is an issue for you." So demonstrating empathy is important in working with women. They do recognize the difference between sympathy, pity, and empathy. Change the slide. So back one, please. Several other things you want to be considering. Be authentic. That means that you're going to be yourself. You're not in your sales mode. You're not in your motivating mode. You are simply being yourself and listening. You are transparent, reliable. Yeah, I sort of went on to this. Okay, we can go to the next one. In speaking of empathy, it is really the middle portion between thinking and feeling. It is understandability. It is, I understand what you're facing, and I'm here with you. And that's important to women because they want to know that someone is sharing their feelings with them, or that there are other people sharing their feelings. But they don't want you to take them from them and work with them or work without them. The next one. So I have a client who has a family trust, and it has a great deal of money in it. And one of the things she decided to do with it when it was handed to her and her mother passed away was to put library bookmobiles all over little towns in the South where she is from, because she recognized that a lot of the kids don't have access to reading or don't have access to a library or even an iPad or anything like that. When we work together and talk about her endowment, she doesn't want me to tell her what the returns have been. She wants me to tell her, how many bookmobiles can I put on the road this year? How much have I to spare so that I can do what I want to do with these funds? Many women invest with intent, whether it's the family household investments or a big endowment. It is, I want to know what I'm using this money for. And that's why planning is so important, is understanding what these funds are going for. It's more meaningful to them, and they want to talk about that rather than what the money is doing. Now, this is, not my Money Guide Pro pitch, but in our practice, we use it because it's very clear to discuss the intent of these funds. What do we want to do with this? And how does it become meaningful in our lives? Not the returns, but what we're going to do with the money. And many women want that perspective. Next. So I talked about earlier that 70% of women leave their advisors in the first 12 months. There are several things going on here. One reported study is lack of respect. The women don't feel they've been respected. I say it's a matter of, you may not have cultivated the relationship with the woman as much as you have the man, and she feels that your relationship is with him and not her. So starting at the very beginning, encouraging the female spouse to engage, to be part of the decisions, not to have meetings without her. Even if she's quiet in those meetings, it is very likely that she's the deciding factor. They walk out of that room and she says, no, we're not going to do that. Or yes, that sounds like a good thing. So lack of respect is the first thing. The second is relationship neglect. Many women, and particularly if they've had a crisis event in their lives, want to know that someone is available to answer their questions and to be there for them. So being proactive is very important to them. Waiting for them to call you may be a mistake because they may not want to do that. It depends on how strong the relationship and the trust is. The third thing is this lack of services that meet the women's needs. And it's not that women have such exceptional needs. It's how you present them to the women that make it different. Next. So this is a quote from an actual woman who was telling me about her relationship with her old financial planner. And she said it occurred to her when they were talking that he was talking at her. He wasn't talking with her. He wasn't engaging her in the process. He was simply reporting verbally. Her husband had checked out, and she said, "Why am I going to give all my money to this guy? Why am I trusting him when he didn't even notice that we're not listening?" So immediately she moved her investments to another firm. Women's roles have changed over the last 50 years. When I started as a practitioner 44 years ago, one of my first clients was a woman who said, "I think I need what you do. I live in a condo in Chicago, and I've never written a check because my husband always took care of that. And I don't know how to pay the condo assessment fee." And the second thing she told me was there was a car in the garage, but she didn't know how to put gas in it. And so she felt she needed help in those very basic things before we talked about her finances. Today, when you look at those numbers I gave you about so many women being breadwinners, so many women being charged with the responsibility of their family and working, 4 out of 10 families, the woman is the breadwinner. You're looking at women who are much more financially savvy, but either don't have time or need more support in their thinking, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. So some of the discussions that you might consider in having with your female, particularly married women or women who are single with a family, what roles do you take on in the family? Which ones would you rather not take on? Looking at their shared child-rearing, family-related financial responsibilities, what roles do you assume now? What do you think might change? What are your interests? Getting to know that woman and what motivates her to do the things that she is doing and what's important, and honoring that changing role in the community and in the household. So I have 3 myths that I want to talk about. The first one is women need more or different help than men managing their money. Well, let's get clear about something. People are people. They want to have financial freedom. They want to have a secure retirement. By the way, I don't believe in the word retirement. I call it next phase because it's not a conventional retirement anymore. When my grandfather retired from the railroad, they handed him a gold watch and he sat on the porch for 2 months and then died of a heart attack. That's not exactly what all of us are doing today. I'm on my next phase right now from teaching for 13 years at Texas Tech University and now working on some different things. So we all have the same needs to have goals and objectives and meet those. Now, they may be a little different in purpose, but we have the same need to do that. One of the things we want to talk about is sort of this gender difference. When men know something about something, they consider themselves experts. Women can have a PhD in it and they still don't feel they know enough. So women are underconfident, and particularly in their investing and financial planning, and men are overconfident. One of the first clients I had was a man that I sat with. He was married, but he didn't bring his wife because he always makes the decisions. And he looked at me and I talked to him about what kinds of things we needed to do to have a better plan. And he looked at me and said, "Just give me some of that, honey." Now, I realize not all men are like that, but men are expected, they're socialized to think they know more about their financial life than they probably do. Women are socialized not to know and are underconfident about it. Next. Myth number 2, women are more risk averse than men. Okay, that may well be. One of the studies that we have done on women and resources is if people have fewer resources, they may be more risk averse. But you can't count on it by pigeonholing your women client as risk averse. And let's talk a minute about 3 types of risk. There's the risk tolerance, which is what can I stand emotionally? It means I may have the resources, but I may have to jump out the window if I have to withstand some risk. There is risk capacity. That is, what can I stand financially? Not respective of what emotionally I can stand, but what can my finances stand in the way of risk? And the last one is risk requirement. And that is, what is the risk I need to take to reach my goals and objectives? Now, we may have to adjust those going on, and you understand that if you're money guide users in adjusting goals, the point is those risks, whether you're more risk averse or less risk averse, there is still a risk requirement that you need to be able to make those goals. So trying to decide that a woman is more risk averse is probably not worth the time and effort. Next. Myth number 3, women can't save because they are uber consumers. I am positive that nobody tracks when a man buys 3 iPads and 2 new technology gadgets. But everybody notices when a woman comes home with 3 pair of shoes. A friend of mine went out and bought a Tesla. His wife, to counter that, went out and bought 3 pair of shoes. My point is, men and women buy differently. They value different things. So saying that they can't save is another one of those myths that I don't believe. I believe that we need to understand and respect how different people buy and how different people take to saving and taking someone through the process of resistance or reluctance to saving. And notice I said process is what gets people motivated to change their behavior, not to tell them that they spend too much. Next. Okay, so here are some fatal relationship moves. Assume that the man is the decision maker. As I said before, in a lot of couples, the women will come out and say, wait a minute, I listened to that, I'm not comfortable with this. They will be the women behind the man, the decision behind the man. By the same token, don't assume that a single woman makes all of her own financial decisions. One of my first clients was a 40-year-old woman in the advertising industry. And she met with me 4 or 5 times, and we put together a financial plan. And when I was going to present the plan, she brought in her father. And I recognized that she wasn't my client, he was. And he was coming in to make sure that I had done all the things that I needed to do to satisfy what needed to happen for his daughter. Don't assume that a single woman wants to marry. One of my clients a few years ago said, I needed to find a new financial planner because my advisor said, well, don't worry about that. When you marry, we'll talk about it. As though that was an ultimate goal for her. Next. Don't assume a widow wants you to take care of it. The woman that I talked about who didn't know how to put gas in the car and didn't know how to write a check told me that her husband always put her arm around her and said, "Don't worry, I'm making sure that I'm taking good care of you." And then he died. And when she had an advisor, someone from a local bank, the first thing he did was put his arm around her and say, "Don't worry, I knew what your husband wanted. I'm going to take care of you." This is not what she wanted to hear. She wanted to have her own relationship, her own empowerment. So don't assume that women want you, the husband, to set it all up with you in advance so they don't have to worry. Don't assume a widow will let you handle everything and just call when she has questions. Depending on the strength of the relationship, she may not call you, or she doesn't feel confident. She may go to the next door neighbor. She may go to someone that she has an existing trusting relationship. But the way for you to keep her is to reach out, be proactive, continue that relationship in that trusted advisor position. Don't patronize or use condescending language or actions. Women aren't stupid. They have interest in things or they don't have interest. They have education in things or they don't have education, but they're not stupid. Next. So I talked about earlier when new clients come in that you include the female spouse as much as possible in all planning discussions. And you might find that women are reluctant to speak in front of their husband, or reluctant to make comments because they may be unsure of what they're saying. But giving them the freedom to say that, giving them the guidelines that there are no dumb questions, that you can ask anything you want, and I will take the time and be here and available to answer them for you, is a very empowering statement for women. So when I started as a financial planner, my first financial plan was 103 pages. The client looked at me and said, "Oh my God, you published." Because I thought I had to tell her everything that I knew and probably a bunch of stuff that I didn't know. What I discovered was the plan is largely for us to craft together, and for her or him or them to be responsible for it. And the only way to do that is have the discussion in the discovery process that allows them to talk about anything they want, in any way they want, to ask questions that keep them talking, that give me clues to what is needed in their financial life beyond the technical stuff, the quantitative stuff. Quantitative material you gather from your data gathering. The qualitative is the touchy-feely that you need to understand in the context of how they say it to you. So expressing what they feel about their past or present, or what their future goals are, what their challenges are, anything that helps you collaborate on their financial plan. Notice I say collaborate. One of the things I learned over 40 odd years in this business is I don't give advice. I help the client find the answer and the solution. I may give them alternatives, but ultimately what they decide is what is right for them in what they need to do. Now, I may say, this I think is the best plan of action, but you need to decide, is this the right one for you? Next. So one of the things that I tell my students is our professional responsibility. And we are not financial planners. We're not investment advisors. we're not in the financial advisory business. We are in the business of managing expectations. Think about that. Your clients want to do things in their lifetime, and you need to help them set the parameters and to know what they can and cannot do. You need to help manage their expectations around what they can and cannot do. You can only do this successfully if you know how to engender trust, if you know how to work with people. And what's interesting is Stephen Covey says in his book on the speed of trust, trust is the thing that we least talk about, that we least work on, and probably the most successful if we do work on it in our people skills. That we can easily make changes that help people trust us with our advice, with our planning skills, with the things that they need to get where they want to go. The second thing is know what their expectations are. The only way you can do that is to ask. One of the things that we do in our firm is when we sit down with a new client, we say, what would have to happen 12 months from now for you to feel this has been a successful relationship for you? So we're asking them in advance what their expectations are. First, so if they're totally unrealistic, we can disabuse them of those expectations. No, I can't give you a 20% return over the next 20 years. But also because once I know what they are, I will know how to speak to them about their expectations. So I need to know how to report to them. I will need to know how to speak to them, how many times they want to be contacted, what is important when I do contact them. The last thing is know how to motivate them to action. What is it that will get them to get off their keisters and do what needs to be done to have a good financial life? And it's different for everyone. I had a friend of mine who said to me, and there was a book written called The Number on this same thing, but she said, everybody has a certain amount of money that when they have it, they feel wealthy. It could be $100,000, it could be $1 million, it could be 10 million. Whatever it is unique. Well, motivation is unique to people as well. What is it that will say, yes, I want to do this, I want to have this, I'm willing to take these sacrifices today to get where I'm going tomorrow? You can only do these things if you shut up and listen. Think about when your client a brand new client comes into your office, and what are the first things you say to them? If you find yourself saying, here's what we can do for you, I suggest you rethink it. Things like, what brings you here? What's on your mind today? What is it that is challenging you at present that you think we can do, that we can help you with? Okay, next. So I've given you, assuming you get access to these slides, a couple of pages of some things that engender trust, promote relationships, and keep conversations going. Now, you may be very familiar with them, or it may be the first time you've heard them, but you use them all the time. It's just kind of a reminder of some things that can help you have good discussions with your client. Minimal encouragers, things like, yes. I will tell you how difficult it is to have this webinar and not getting feedback from you because I can't see your faces. I don't know what you're responding to. Pacing, mirroring or matching the client's behavior in tone, volume, content, so that you're not talking too fast for them or you're not talking too slowly. Probing, asking open-ended questions, Socratic questions, to get more information. Why do you think that? What would make this better for you? Asking them questions so they can give you more information. Paraphrasing, restating, saying things in a different word, but in a non-judgmental way. So understanding what the client said to bring it back to them. Reflecting. This is expressing in your own words the feelings that your client has shown you or has implied, and so that you demonstrate that you understand there's more than just words going into the content or what they're telling you. There's context around what they're telling you. Clarifying, attempting to focus or understand on what the client said. Sometimes, and as we all do, we don't say what we mean. So if you clarify it, or let me make sure I understand, you said this, helps you understand what they were attempting to get to tell you about. Next. There we go. Reframing, that is explaining something in a positive or in a different context may give people a different perspective to reorganize. I'll give you an example, and this came from Danny Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics, and he's a psychology professor. Basically, let's say you go into a grocery store, and there's a stack of lunch meat sitting there, and it says bologna, 90% fat-free. And sitting next to it is another stack that says bologna, 10% fat. Which one are you going to take? Most people are going to take the 90% fat-free because it sounds better. Is it the exact same content? Yes. But presenting things in a different way help people make a choice in perception that may help them find a different path to their thinking. Parroting, repeating word for word what the client has said. You remember when you were a kid and your brother used to do that to you? Well, you might use it now and then for effect with a client. Validation, an attempt to let the client know you accept and are empathetic to what they've said. Now, there's 3 levels of this. The first one is you totally agree with them. The second one is you have something that you can agree with them on, but not everything. The third is your feelings are important. In other words, I don't really agree with you at all, but I agree with your right to have those feelings. The last one is summarizing or synthesizing what's been communicated to you by the client. Focus on what these scattered ideas may have been, so you present a clear perspective on what has been discussed in a concept or in the whole meeting to kind of give a closure to what you have discussed. Okay, one last one. Next, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with 3 things I've learned over 40 years in this business. Keep your ears open and your mouth shut. I never learned anything from my clients while I was talking. The more I listened, the more I learned about them, the more I could manage their expectations, the more I could keep them from doing something they shouldn't do. They might not want to do. Number 2, an engaged client is a happy one. So leading them through the decision-making may take longer than saying, here's what I think you should do, but it will ensure that they own these solutions. You worked through the process, and they've come to the conclusion that this is where they need to go. That is worth everything in getting them to stay with you and with their plan. The last thing is don't should on yourself or anyone else. You notice I just did that once. It is a little hard to live life without shoulding, but shoulding is judgmental and it causes barriers and resentments. As soon as I say, you should do this, the first thing you become is defensive. If I say, have you thought about doing something this way? It isn't judgmental. So that's about all I came up with for today, but I do am think we have some questions. So if we have
Yes.
those, we can go through them now.
Yes, great. Thank you. The first question, a number of people asked if we would be sharing the deck or the slides with you all. And yes, we will send out an email with a replay of the webinar and with the slides as you know, in a format that you guys can all view it. So we had one question about whether you can recommend some reading in this area, because they see, you know, this sort of stuff all the time, and so that was one of the first questions.
Okay, well, unfortunately, there aren't any great communication books or ones that I like, but there are some good books by Kathleen Kingsbury, one on working with couples. She has some very good ideas on how to further conversation with people. So I suggest you look up Kingsbury's books. There is a book by, you might want to look up a guy named Brad Klontz, Klontz. He's written some wonderful things on these subjects, and I think you would enjoy some of these things. He also has some videos that explain money histories and things like that would help you communicate with your clients in a different way.
Another question we have is, what are some of your go-to questions when initially working with a client?
Well, the first thing is, I ask them what they think I could do, what's on their mind, because they usually, financial planning is a crisis profession. Nobody wakes up one day and says, gee, I think I'll go see a financial planner. It's kind of like, gee, I think I'll go get a tooth pulled. So asking them what's on their minds and to get them talking about what it is that they think is going on, allowing them to have these conversations. And then I ask a bunch of probing questions. You just told me a little bit about your family. Tell me a little bit more about your children, or tell me what responsibilities you might have outside of your home with your grandmother, or whatever. Things that really get to the heart of who they are as people and what's important to them. Notice I didn't say anything about, let me tell you what we can do for you, because I don't know yet. I won't know until I have some really good conversations with them.
Okay, great. So we have quite a few questions rolling in. I'm going to get through as many as possible. So what would be a more empathetic way to offer condolences? So if I'm sorry for your loss is not personal enough, what else would you recommend?
I generally would say I am sorry that you, or that I heard that someone passed, or if they tell you that, you'd say, I can't tell you the feelings I have right now. What a wonderful person he was or she was. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about him? Because what I find with people who suffered a loss is they want to talk about it. They want to talk about that person. They don't want you to shut them down with, I'm sorry for your loss. So generally I say, and I'll say things like, I don't know where you are at this time, but if there's anything that I can do, I'm here for you. I sit in your corner.
Great. How do you get a client to understand taking on a bit more risk as far as asset allocation? I have a client that has at least another 11 years to work, and she insists on not losing money.
Okay, so this is where you have to change your perspective. And usually I'll say, okay, you want to eat less well or sleep less well? Do you want to take some risk today so you can have a more secure retirement in 11 years? Or do you want to continue the way the way you're thinking? Because there's no riskless investment. There's nothing that you can put your money in, including putting it in 3 mattresses for diversification, that doesn't have risk. We just need to choose which risk you're going to take.
Okay. There are two Money Guide Pro related questions. So the first one is, you mentioned Money Guide Pro earlier, and the question is, do you find that women want to engage more in financial plans, or they need more of the big picture through a financial plan? And, kind of how does that relate to your experience with Money Guide Pro? The second question related to Money Guide Pro is, how do you like Money Guide Pro, and why would you recommend it?
Well, okay, first things first. Women like to be taken through the process, and men do too, actually. And when you go through the financial planning process, they get to see where these numbers are coming from and what changes can be made, and doing it on the fly. I mean, my first financial planning stuff, you had to take it in the back room for 3 days and come back with an answer. So you get collaborative, interactive opportunity for them to work on it with you. So most women want context around their investing. They want context around their financial life. And that's where Money Guide Pro comes in. It gives you an incredible tool to take them through this process. Secondly, I like Money Guide Pro because it is collaborative and interactive. It is what we teach at Texas Tech. In fact, early on, I asked the good folks at Money Guide if they would grant us copies so we could teach our students with it. And we do, and they love it because it speaks to goals and objectives and life, not speaks to numbers. And so saying, yes, we believe you can do this, and look how it can happen. Or we believe if you make these few changes, it can happen in a better way, is incredibly empowering to the people that you're working with. You're not making the decision. The machine is not making the decision. The client is.
Great. Deena, do you market yourself as a financial planner or investment advisor? Do you do planning or only manage assets too?
No, planning, assets, we do it all. Now, I will tell you that in early days, we did comprehensive financial plans. What we found out is people wanted them, they just didn't want to pay for them. And it also took, years and years to do it. We now do what we call holistic planning, and that is we tackle the things that are most important first, and as the planning goes on, we focus in on special issues. And so by the end of a year, we have, looked at everything. But we didn't hand it all to them in 103 pages. So what I think is important is whether you do just asset management, that you do it in the context of life, in the context of a financial plan. What do they need? And why do they need it?
Okay, great. And a follow-up to that one, was they're curious if the discovery process is different depending on managing assets versus planning only.
Personally, if you're only managing assets and you don't ask some of these questions, I think you're doing your clients a disservice. Because how do you know what to do with the money unless you ask them about their lives? That's making decisions in a vacuum. And with women clients, I said they want to invest with a purpose. So you need to know what that purpose is. You may find a bunch of people who just want to invest to maximize return, but frankly, I think that's a job of a money manager, not a financial planner.
And just one other related Money Guide Pro question is, do you find the women engaging more in the expectations and concerns or goals section of the software, and then also the household risk and how do you bring the household risk together when you have the first person and the second person?
Oh, well, first of all, recognize, not everybody's going to share the same risk tolerance. Remember, tolerance is the emotional tolerance that they can. So I speak to the risk requirement. Say, look, this is what the risk we need to take in order to do what you want to do. Now, if that's, too much for one of you, let's talk about how we can take a look at this a little differently and find out what, generally you could start out a little bit lower risk and move it up a little bit, giving them a little time to have more experience. But quite frankly, I just as soon jump in and manage their expectations as we go along. Look, it's going to be bumpy, but we call that volatility. And we call it volatility for the first 12 months or so. So I'm not going to tell you what happens on a daily basis. And I don't want you to look at the paper either. So we just try to manage how crazy they can get. And we talk with them frequently. Okay, you saw what happened in the market yesterday. How are you feeling about that? Many advisors don't want to breach down markets with their clients. They don't want to reach out when things are looking bad. That's the best time to reach out.
Great. Can you just restate the author that you recommended for further research, please?
Oh, Klontz. Brad Klontz, Klontz. It's Brad and his son, maybe Stephen, I'm not sure. But they've done a lot of work in the area of communication and money history and things that I think would help you understand talking with clients a little better. Okay. And if you look him up on the website, he's on there.
Great. And then someone also shared the name of a book, and that is Amy Florian's book on No Longer Awkward. It has some good ideas on speaking with someone after a loss. And I've actually seen her. I've actually seen her go in person speak, and she definitely has some very good tips and some very good information based on her own story and her experience on that.
You're absolutely right. I neglected to remember that. It's a great book. Look in that one.
Yeah. And then there's an article that someone also shared that we can also share out with you guys, and it's a website address, but it's basically John Pavlovitz, PAVLOVITZ.com maybe, and it's called The Grieving Need You Most. I'm not sure, maybe that was juxtaposed, but something around the grieving you need most after the funeral. So we can share that. We can take a look at that and share that as well. And I think we just have a couple of more minutes left, but I think that kind of covers what we have time for at this stage. Let's see, there was one last thing in terms of a okay, and then so what we will do is we will, like I mentioned, send out a replay and resources along with the deck to everyone. So I just want to thank Deena for sharing her insight with us, because obviously after being in the business for as many years as she's been in the business, I think she's been able to gather quite a bit of insight in working with women. But again, I just want to thank you, Deena, and I just want to offer you an opportunity to give them any parting thoughts or last words.
Well, I do want to thank you all for being here. It's a little difficult for me on a webinar because I like to see faces and interaction, but I hope that if you have any questions that you'll contact me at Deena@DeenaKatz.com. I'm happy to be available and answer any questions for you. And thanks for being here.
Deena, just so you know, one of our listeners or attendees did let you know that halfway through it when you mentioned, because it is true, when you're on a webinar, it's hard to know how you're doing, and it's really challenging. But they just let you know that you are doing great. And also a couple other folks who just thanked you and said it was very helpful and thanks for hosting and so on. So there you go. So there's your feedback, in instant feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You did a great job, Deena. Thank you so much for the helpful information.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.